Listo.
So we're ready.
Awesome.
So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on another Brújula chat. Brújula is a joint effort by Veoleo and Entre podcast to help families navigate life at home during the quarantine. I am Mónica Leal, co-host and co-founder of Entre podcast. I am joined by Paula Niño, my co-host and co-founder. We are also joined by Alexis Rujinis. You can't see her, she's here, but you can see her. She's the co-founder of Veoleo, a company dedicated to creating Spanish Latinx content that celebrates Latin American culture and heritage. We hope you have been enjoying the series. We're putting a lot of love and energy into it, and we want to hear back from you with any comments and future chat suggestions. Today's chat is about a topic that has dominated a big part of our lives since the stay-at-home orders have started trickling in, and that is distance learning, or aka the roller coaster ride of our lives. And we're going to be focusing in particular today with on dual language education, right, and how that dynamic has been sort of changed by this new reality. And for that we have our fabulous guest Laura Pantin.
Hello.
Hi, Laura. She's a dual language educator in Florida. And you may also know her from her language company, Learning Bilingually. Welcome, Laura. And we're so happy to have you here today. And please feel free to send your questions for Laura using the chat box to the left of your screen. We'll be saving time at the end of the chat to talk about them.
Yeah.
So... so Laura, let's start with a question that is, it's a general question, but it's something that, on our circles, right, Paula and myself, we've been talking about the other end of distance learning, which is the parent end and the child end, right? But we want to know, how are you doing as a teacher with this new environment? I mean, this was so abrupt. You suddenly had to change everything about how you your job. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's definitely been a huge shift. So I currently teach fourth grade dual language in a two-way side-by-side program. So I have two groups of students and I do the Spanish side and then a partner that does the English side. So right then and there, like the logistics of managing your two groups, your partner teaching has really been different. I'm communicating every single day with my partner through text, through Zooming, through anything to really figure out how we're putting assignments out there for our kids, what type of video lessons we're doing, live lessons, recorded lessons. So this shift of just the logistics of teaching in general has been completely different. Also making sure that our kids are engaged. We have 44 students between the two groups. So figuring out that they're engaged and they're, interacting with us, even if not all assignments are being turned in. Of course, the more important thing is, how they're doing, connecting with them every day. So that has been a huge shift and definitely like hard to get used to. And also I think just as an educator, one of the things that we value most in our profession is to be there with the kids. So to be live in person, building those relationships, hugging our kids and really being there in person with them. So when you take that away, the dynamics change a little bit. We're still building those relationships as much as we can through, videos and FaceTimes and all the things we can do, but it's different and it's harder. But luckily, I think a lot of educators are very flexible and adaptable. And, we have to kind of be flexible when we're teaching in general, when we're in person, normal teaching. So you can see across, like you can see it on these social media platforms, how teachers and educators and dual language teachers have really like adapted to this environment in a way that kind of shows, we got this, it's hard, but we're doing everything we can to help support our kids, help support their families and just, be there for them as much as we can in this new environment.
Yes, and we are so appreciative of the effort. We know that being a teacher just on a regular sort of circumstance is hard. And on top of that, adding this to sort of your workload is just we really deeply appreciate it. But and do you find that there are any particular challenges to do a language education in the context that we're in now?
Yeah, so definitely like in dual language education, for the most part, especially two-way programs, you have kind of two sets of parents and children and families. So you have on one end, the children who, or the families who put their child in the program who want them to learn a second language and want them to learn like Spanish, for example. So they don't speak Spanish at home, but they want their child to gain this new language. So in that sense, you know, now these parents at home have to find ways additional to what the teacher may be providing to support that target language use and to help them navigate their Spanish assignments. You know, now parents are gonna have to be even a little bit more involved in that sense because yeah, you have that, the teacher support hopefully, but then now you want to keep that interaction going and they're not getting the same amount of Spanish as they would in the classroom. And then on the other spectrum, you have the families of children who want to maintain their native language, their heritage language. And so they don't speak maybe English at home, the majority language. So then they're having to navigate a lot of emails, instructions from schools, teachers, districts in English. Now, hopefully, you know, districts should be providing those translated documents for the most part, but we know that's not always the case. And we know that in that sense, they have to help their child also navigate the English assignments and the things in English. So it's on those two ends, it's definitely those particular challenges with dual language education in the families of these programs.
Right. And those two types of dynamics are difficult because already, you know, being at home with your child and doing something that you really are not trained to do, which is teach.
Yeah.
You can be a parent, but being a teacher, those are two separate things, right? Those are different skills. And on top of that, having a foreign language, right, being introduced into that mix can be frustrating. And we actually have heard on our Facebook group, the Entre Facebook group, parents talking about that and commenting about that, you know, that they're finding it very difficult to find support on a daily basis, right? Because if you think about families that don't speak the minority or the majority language, right, very well, this is a daily struggle. It's not something that's going to come from time to time. So what would you tell those families that, I mean, what can they do to help the children?
I think first and foremost, like in general, dual language programs can't succeed without strong parent-teacher relationships. So in minus the distance learning in general, that communication and that support is necessary. So now with distance learning, yes, we as educators and families on both ends have to be flexible and have to know that there's a lot on each other's plates and, you know, everyone has their own families and their own things, but we still need to support, communicate. So for example, we have certain office hours a day, but we, you know, through emails, texts, FaceTime, live, anything that we can to provide that support to help parents, we try and do. Also, I think for families, it's so important for them each day to just at the end of the day, after they're done with, the kids are done with assignments or whatever the structure is, check in with your child, ask them, you know, kind of to self-reflect, you know, what was hard about today? What did you have a difficulty with a Spanish kind of concept or assignment or an English assignment? And that way the parents have more kind of specific information to be able to give that to the teachers as well. Because sometimes it's hard for us with all our kids online to know specifically this child is having trouble with this or that. And then to know that there are resources out there, and there are a lot of resources out there online for families to access right now. A lot of companies have been really great to provide free resources, books online and things like that, since we know we might not be able to get to a library or might not be able to have that, you know, paper from, you know, worksheet or whatever you were doing maybe regularly in your classroom. There are also like language book boxes that maybe families, if they're able to subscribe to and have that maybe weekly or monthly extra support at home where they get bilingual books and things like that. I always say also right now with this distance learning, dual language families have access to other families in the program. So doing virtual play dates for the young kids, virtual hangouts for the older kids, virtual study dates where the families are there, of course, and even though it might be hard to communicate in the target language, you know, let your child have a translator app, a dictionary, and we know those translator apps aren't always grammatically correct, and you know, not the first thing maybe we would use, but they are a great resource, especially now that children, we want them to communicate in that second language, that target language. So having them meet virtually with their students, maybe if it's not like during the teacher educational time setting on the weekends or things like that, can also help provide support for families so they can talk to each other and the kids can talk to each other as well.
That's really good advice. And you know, I'm going to go back to the group and recommend that to the mom, particularly that because she seemed really like she really needed support. And that's a good idea, you know, to reach out to other parents that come maybe from heritage language homes, right?
Yeah.
Where they speak the language and where you can schedule the Zoom play date, you know, or maybe even like, that's right, like maybe do a little bit of like an assignment together.
Yeah.
That's a great, and what would do you have any suggestions of any fun activities maybe that they could do in a play date? Now that, I mean, this is kind of veering off a little bit, but like, I think this is a really good tip for families that don't have that target language.
Yeah, I mean, I think as like, make it fun. And I'm such a like big proponent of like any like game you have at home that even might be an English game, like Guess Who or Pictionary or anything like that, you can make into a Spanish game, right? So like Guess Who, if the other child has it, or you're able to create some cards, it doesn't have to be the exact game board, but the parents send each other cards of people, right? And they both have them, and then you have sentence stems and the kids have to be like, okay, tiene ojos azules o marrones, and they're communicating with this game that we all know and have played before, but in the target language. Or you have kind of like your 10, 15 words that you want your child, both children, to practice in the target language. And so you do a type of charades where, you know, one child has to explain and the other one has to guess from those 15 words, what's the word that they're looking for. So I think in any way that we can make it fun, engaging, a scavenger hunt also, this can be both virtual or even if you just want to do it in your home, have, you know, hide 15, 20 words around your house, and then your child has to go find them. And then as soon as they find them, they have to read it out loud before they can go find the next one. So you're practicing that oral language, that reading, making it fun, engaging. You can even do something like, you can do like a virtual cooking date where, you know, the child they both have the same recipe, but you maybe beforehand or during it, you translate the recipe to the target language. You have it there now in English and you have it in the target language, and you cook together. And with that, you might be doing a little Spanglish, a little code switching, but that's okay. That's fine right now. That's awesome. So, you know, you can have that, those types of activities. Playing games. You can even do a live dance party, Zumba thing where you're listening to bilingual music and you're up there and you're talking and you're saying words. I think anything that at this time makes it fun and makes it not feel like, oh, this is something else, another, you know, assignment or another extra thing that I have to do, but in a fun way where you're encouraging them to use the target language, and will be really helpful for them to continue that.
Yeah, that's a good example of like, you know, it's important when you're in school, you know, and when you're in any space, you know, to build community, right? To focus on being, you know, participating in the school community and meeting other parents and just really getting in there, because, you know, in a situation like this, if you have those bonds, you can translate that into an actual support group for what, you know, is needed now.
Yeah.
Would you recommend, or is there a way in which you could incentivize them to use the target language? Because I think of these things and I know what'll happen. They'll revert to English. Even my daughter, who speaks Spanish well, she, you know, it's not, but with most of her peers, she speaks in English. So you know, I wouldn't want to make it, like you said, it should be fun. And if they switch, it's okay. But
Right.
do you have any suggestions maybe from the classroom that you
Yeah.
use to motivate them to use the target language throughout that time period?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the most difficult part. And in my own classroom for my fourth graders, I had a stamp card. So I did have a card with like 20 stars on it. And they basically, anytime I heard them use the target language, whether it was answering a question out of the blue, I heard it during recess or I heard it during lunch, anytime they would get a check mark on their star. And when they got to the end, there was some type of prize and like, you know, some external, you know, motivator that really, you know, did absolutely like work with a lot of my like non-native Spanish speakers. A lot of them, it worked a lot with them for sure. Spanish speakers too, they were all excited. We had a treasure box, so then they got to pick out something. But I think even if you're doing a virtual hangout or virtual, if you have that, you can create it out of a note card, whatever, and give them certain, you need to earn 10 checks today. So you earn 10 checks, then, you know, you get this, or we do it weekly, you know, you have 2 hangouts this week. So if you earn 15 checks during each hangout, so that means you're saying sometimes at least 15 sentences or however you want to do it, then you earn this little, you know, we can make homemade ice cream or we can, you know, do something else. Or so you have that little card. So it's like a physical reminder. And then they do get excited of like, oh yes, and then proud too, like, wow, I spoke 15 times in Spanish in this 30-minute hangout. That's pretty cool. So
Yeah,
using maybe like that type of.
that's a good idea.
Incentive. They love that. Anything,
Yeah.
my daughter, anything to do with stickers, my daughter will be in.
In any grade, because I used it in kindergarten and in fourth grade. So.
It's magical, really. And you know, talking about games, right? And you featured a project with your fourth graders on your Instagram account where they posted videos explaining in Spanish how to do something.
Yeah.
Which sounds super fun, right? And
yeah.
so can you talk to us a little bit about how you came up with that and how did the kids respond?
Yeah, so I was thinking at the beginning of this whole distance learning thing and change, how am I going to get, besides the live meetings, which our live meetings are more to like go over what you will have to do today and like check in, and it's not so much all the kids get to talk at once. So I was thinking, how am I going to get them to practice their oral language in Spanish, to really communicate and speak? So I'm using other websites for them to read and write and all that, but the oral language, which is what most of them struggle with the most, how am I going to get that daily or weekly practice? So I had heard of Flipgrid, which I had never used, but now I'm obsessed with. So, and the kids are too, they absolutely love this app. But basically, I came up with some ideas for a weekly Flipgrid. So they have to record a video every week of them responding in Spanish and to a certain question that I pose. And what I do is that I do a model video. So I answer the question myself and show them kind of what I'm expecting. And they have been so creative and they love it because you can also answer back to other students. So they're getting that kind of, that feedback from their peers. And you can also, as an educator, like message back a video and I'm like, I love your, me encanta tu video, que creativo. And we get to kind of have our own little connection there. And it's some great topics that relate to their life. So I think, so if anything else I can think for parents in this time is language learning has to be meaningful and has to be relatable. So every video that I've done has been related to them. So I asked them to share a book they've read or talk about a cultural tradition that they celebrate or teach us something like that one, or I asked their opinion about something. So it's been related to them, which makes it, I think, easier for them to speak on, even if it's in Spanish, because they're like, oh, this is about me. So it's more interesting. Then they've loved it. They love Flipgrid. So, and just recording videos. Some parents send them to me through email because they can't upload, and that's been great too. So you don't have to specifically use this tool if you don't have it, but you can have your child record a video creating a STEM project and an invention they created, and then have it recorded and share it with your dual language teacher and families. any way that you can get them excited, and they all love that social media and videos of
it. Yes.
Yes, they like that, especially now. And I feel like the younger ones have gotten exposed to these technologies probably sooner than they would have, but they've embraced it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
they've loved it. One thing, and that was for older students, but in our group, in our Facebook group, some parents had asked maybe, and I don't know if you have any suggestions about how to teach, especially the younger kids who are just starting to learn letter sounds and forming syllables. Do you have any resources that might help for that, and also for verb conjugation?
Oh yes,
like in a fun way.
Yeah, that's the fun one. Yeah, for the young kids, I say at first for just speaking and at home, like if they ask for something, for example, oh, I want an apple, or oh, I want to have a sandwich, then as a parent in that moment, take it as a learning opportunity and say, okay, wait, how do you say apple in Spanish? Or how do we say sandwich? What do you want in your sandwich? And if neither of you know, which is totally fine, look it up together. That's a moment where you can be like, oh, this is so cool. I want to learn this word. Let's look it up together. So you as a parent are modeling that excitement and that willingness, and then they're hopefully seeing that and taking that model of like, okay, yeah, let's look it up. And then with that, I recommend for the younger ones and even for the older ones, keep a journal, get a composition notebook, a spiral notebook, and make it like your bilingual dictionary that you're creating. So when you learn about that word, that's apple, and you know it's manzana in Spanish, write it down in English and in Spanish and draw a little picture. So now you're kind of curating your own little bilingual dictionary and helping your child get that vocabulary in both languages, and you're making those connections between the languages for them. So this is, I think, a great little way to like add that help in terms of like verbs and things. As if you can make it into a game, you can do also like a verb charade where you have a list of verbs that you want to conjugate in the present tense, and then you have to say, okay, we're doing it in the present tense and now we're acting it out. So how would you, if I'm doing this, nadar, how will we conjugate that now in the present tense? So making anything, if you can, with movement and gestures. I know I did that all the time in kindergarten. Anything where they see you excited, enthusiastic about it. There are also fabulous websites and videos on YouTube from specific people that create those, syllable videos and monosílabo and certain things that the kids love in terms of practicing their syllables. And they like say, okay, say the word mama, and then you have to say it. So don't be afraid to use a little bit of those resources, because it might be additional things online, but that's where we are right now with getting kind of anything that we can. And still doing, I also have something like that I used to do in kindergarten called password, so contraseña. So anytime a child entered into my classroom, I had a specific word like taped outside my classroom for every week. So we were working on our, high frequency words in Spanish, and they would have to say before they entered the classroom at any time. So even doing that at home with your young ones and saying, okay, today's special word is, gusta. And you have to say it every time before you talk to me. So before we talk, you got to say gusta, and then I'll be able to answer and talk. And so making it where it's still kind of like a little game. And then if they don't say it, you're like, like you're mimicking, like, no, you have to say the word, so they get excited about that. So making it fun. And there is, we use in 4th grade Conjuguemos, which is a website. And I know some parents that had used it before I introduced it to the class. That's all about verb conjugations, and they have games and things. So that's a website online. I think you have to pay a little yearly subscription, but it's not a lot, but that's a great website because it makes it fun for the kids. But that for the little ones, obviously, like I would say starting that maybe in 2nd grade and older. Kindergarten and 1st, for parents, I recommend, don't worry so much about the grammar and the specifics of the grammar at that point, especially with distance learning. You got to be flexible with the way they're saying things and doing things, but making it fun in any way, I think is kind of key with language learning.
Yeah, those are great suggestions and definitely doable at home.
And we'll make sure to add those to some sort of show notes or something along those lines, because you've shared a lot of really useful resources here. Yeah. We want to keep the, a nice library here. So, shifting a little bit into the sort of the school structure, right? And how can parents ask for help if their kid is struggling with the majority or the minority language, right? And what tools should be at their disposal? And I ask this because a lot of parents are not aware. People are just not aware because, in terms of like the, particularly with public schools, the districts have so many, rules and the way that they run the school. I mean, there's so much information, right? So it's hard to really understand. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think again, and that communication is so important. And I know some parents might feel like, oh, am I emailing too much or am I asking too much? No, I think like you really have to advocate for your child. And sometimes it's hard because like you said, you might not know what's at your disposal, but to know that, your child deserves and the support from their school, the district. So don't be afraid to advocate with that. Many schools, have the ESOL contact, or some schools that have dual language programs have a dual language liaison or kind of advisory committee or something like that. So don't be afraid to go in and look it up if you can in your school, or ask your teacher directly, or email the principal directly and ask about, oh, does our school have this? And can I be put in contact with these people that will be able to provide me with, translated materials or strategies or resources that I can use at home. So definitely don't be afraid to look up what your school offers and use it. That's why it's there. And it's important for, these ESOL contacts and dual language liaisons to be able to help these families that need it and that need the help, the extra support. And also in dual language programs, and it's difficult because everyone does it differently, especially with the distance learning. But, as a parent, if you're getting Spanish assignments and, your child's getting these assignments and there aren't instructions in English for those parents and families that don't speak the target language at home, don't be afraid to ask your child's teacher, can you please, send me an English version or just, a shortened version of what they have to do, or don't be afraid to advocate for yourself as a parent and as a family and say, I don't know how to help my child with this Spanish work at home. Please let me know what I can do, provide me strategies, translated things. And with that also use each other as much as you can as a dual language parents in your group, if you're really struggling and the teacher isn't, communicating as much as you'd like, or the district or the school, try to talk to another parent in your class and in your group and say, can you help me with this? Or so use each other as well. That's something neat about the dual language programs, is you have such a variety of families and parents. So don't be afraid to use each other. And then there are forums online, like you said, even, the Facebook group that you guys have, anything like that you can communicate with other parents in the United States that have these same kind of questions and inquiries.
Right.
Don't be afraid to advocate for your child. And
yes, that's always something that you have to remember. And I think it's and advocating for your child is already, it can be challenging even when the circumstances are
right,
normal, right? Or whatever normal, whatever you want to call it. So in this circumstance where you're home and everything is digital and it's kind of like difficult to communicate in general, it can be challenging, but it is important to remember, right, that your child deserves the best education that they can get. Absolutely. And it's, and right now it's your job to make sure that they get it. So it's nice to hear, right, and coming from an educator, hey, you need to ask, you need to reach out. There are resources out there for you.
Absolutely.
So that's good. And moving forward, right? Because we don't know, this is sort of like a situation that's changing a lot every week, every day, every hour. So we're thinking now, of course, we're thinking about summer, which is going to be interesting.
Yes, it is.
Or anything. I'm sure you're going to get a much deserved rest. Hopefully, I don't know. At least hopefully you'll get it. But moving forward, right? Think about long term and how this could become. I don't like to call things a new normal because nothing about this is normal, right?
Yep.
But this new dynamic, right? That's going to it might spill into next year, right? Into next, and like moving forward, and I want to hear you as a teacher, right? How do you feel about this? I mean, about having to do more long distance learning, digital learning, moving forward. I mean, until we figure this situation out.
Yeah, I definitely think there's going to be a lot of changes happening next year across the country in schools and districts everywhere. I do think there's going to be more online components happening across the board, which it's hard, you know, that I just want to be, and educators just want to be there with the kids and, you know, handing them resources and, you know, being that kind of like provider of and facilitator of, and now we're just going to have to continue during this even summer break, just figuring out what other resources we can use that will engage our kids more, that will help them and support them more. These 2-3 months right now have been, I think, you know, about survival for everyone and really like figuring out what's the best to do at this time. But if this looks different next year, then we are going to have to, as educators, keep educating ourselves and looking to each other to help each other be like, okay, you're using this tool, I can use this and adapt it to Spanish for my dual language class. And, oh, I can grab this resource and then, you know, translate it if I have to, and really figuring out how to do that with kids live. I think, you know, pre-recording lessons for your kids and making that available is going to be something that's going to also be happening. And so it's hard. I want to be in my classroom with my kids in my school and with, you know, my other, you know, teachers and colleagues and families. But I think we're going to have to just keep adapting and, you know, even something as little as, you know, our children's birthday celebrations, like how's that going to look? And those exciting moments where you want the kids to connect with each other, because let's face it, a favorite part of their school day is being with their friends and going to recess and, you know, going to lunch and getting to hang out with their kids. So providing them the space, even if it's online or, you know, at a distance at some time, to get those, you know, times in to see each other and talk to each other and engage on a social emotional level. We're going to have to keep adapting and working together and really being flexible and, you know, but still providing our kids with structure and structure that isn't overwhelming for the families, but structure because they still need that educational and social structure, even if it's online. So.
Yeah, it's important. You know, you really highlighted sort of the holistic school experience, right? It's not just about going and learning. It's about creating your community, your school community, your friends, your teachers, administration staff. I mean, I know with my daughter, she says when she arrives to school, she says good morning to the school guard, and the principal is there, and she, you know, it's a whole her friends, and it's a school is not just a space to learn, it's a feeling, right? You go in there and you feel, and it makes me kind of like emotional to say that because I see that that's something that the kids need. Absolutely. And hopefully we can get them back in as soon as possible. Not just for the parents, right? You know, but it's just to have them have that experience, right?
For them, they miss it. They need that. You need that in person. You know, it's definitely not the same through a screen. You need, you know, they're high-fiving their friends and they're, you know, whispering here and talking about this and playing with each other. Like they need that physical.
Right.
together. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
And that must have an impact on the way that you're teaching too, right? Because, you're, when you're doing a Zoom, for instance, and my daughter has done a couple of Zooms, it can be like, it's strange in some ways because you can't really see all the kids. You can't really interact in that way and connect at that human level. So it is kind of, it's better than nothing,
Of course.
absolutely better. It's the best. I'm glad that it exists, but it's definitely kind of like difficult to make that connection. And how would you say from our end, right, as parents, how do you recommend we approach distance learning in terms of how we talk about it with our kids? And again, I'm thinking more like long term, right? As a way to prepare them, to help them if, let's say, in August, like, we're back to this, right? And like, how would you what would you say? Like, I mean, what to parents?
Yeah, I think approaching it with, it's definitely a topic that's hard to talk about and be like, things might look very different next year. But I think since we have now this time to really slowly and say, as you've seen, things have changed, and, we're adapting to things that happen in our society because we have to adapt, that's something important. We have to be flexible with how we, engage right now with each other and interact. But we can also be hopeful and say and tell them, that we are going to be able to have moments, we are going to be able to see each other, and we are going to be able to, interact with each other in person. It just might look a little differently. But we have to be hopeful, right? I think that that kind of like hope is the last thing you lose. You got to be really hopeful and show that to your kids, and really even creating those opportunities once they are back in school, or however that looks, to, even if they're not back in school every day, or however it looks, to, do drive-bys with your kids and have them see each other in person. So it's not just through the computer screen. We've seen all these like birthday parades and things that kids have done for each other and families. Even doing those types of kind of social distancing play dates or communication is still showing them like, look, we're still going to be able to interact in person. It's just going to look differently, but we're going to find a way to make this all, okay in a sense. So just slowly talking to your kids about it and being hopeful, I think is important with how it'll look.
Right. Keeping that positive attitude.
Yes. It's hard sometimes, but we have to do it.
Right. And I'm sure, when the Zoom light turns on as a teacher, you have to do that too. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that teachers that are listening to us now, they're relating to this probably.
Yeah, exactly.
It's difficult. I mean, to be able to, sort of think about that long term and just, get mentally prepared for that.
Yeah.
And
it's
for the kids.
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's definitely, before we go live, I'm thinking of a million things, and I'm like, okay, this, I'm going to be enthusiastic and smile and just do the best I can and enjoy the time with my kids, whether it's here on video or however, or incorporate any fun activities you can. I mean, I did a scavenger hunt live, and we done a guess who activity with their baby pictures. So anything to get them, us excited too. We, as teachers, we like doing the fun things in classrooms with our kids. So trying to, again, adapt. That's kind of like a key term here for all of us, is really this flexibility and, adapting. So.
Right. Yeah. And it feels like there's talk about, some parents might be worried about their kids sort of being fall behind or something along those lines, right? Where like you're worried that they were doing progress and now suddenly, but maybe that doesn't need to be the priority right now. It's just the circumstances are such that how can you force every day like education and like all of this didactic material?
Yeah,
there's something else going on in their hearts, right? And in their minds, they have there's so much. So
yeah, I think it's definitely like as an educator, it's definitely a balance, and as a parent too, like we want to have all their kids engaged and still doing, going through the structure, and we don't want them to, not be engaged at all, but we want to make it fun still. It's not like we're still teachers right now. We're still in school. We're still, it's still a school year. So we still want to make it engaging and fun for them, even if it's through a screen or at a distance.
There is a question, Laura, that Alexis sent. So for students who might be thriving right now because they learn better, and I guess there are fewer distractions for them learning at home, do you envision that, let's say if you had a student like that, like, will there be accommodations once they return to an in-classroom setting, perhaps?
Yeah. So I think that some students, definitely could be thriving in this environment in the sense that they prefer, they work better with a self-paced kind of rhythm. And I think these uncertain times are giving educators also a lot to think about for when we do get back in the classroom, and a lot to reflect upon. So we are learning a lot more about our kids in general. And we're learning, okay, like I've had a parent say, oh, my daughter's doing well. Like she really enjoys this self-paced kind of at her own rhythm thing. And I'm like, now as an educator, I have to take that and think, okay, if that's one of my students, I'm sure there's a lot more that maybe the parents haven't told me are thriving in this way. So I have to think about, when I go back, maybe make some things in my classroom more self-paced, and maybe, instead of like I'm doing my lesson, you guys listen, let's do checklists, let's do playlists. We do a playlist right now where we give them their assignments, but they really complete them at their own pace. So how can we adapt that now back to our classroom and say, okay, listen, let's do our mini lesson, and then now let's do it. This is what you have to complete. Do it at your own pace. I'll check in with you and have mini conferences with each of my kids and check in. So there are, I think, a lot of ways that this situation has also made us as educators think about our own practice and the way that our classrooms are now going to look. So I think we're all reflecting, and hopefully all teachers are thinking about this. So, if your child is thriving in this environment, we as educators have to think about that. And it'd be great for those parents to communicate that with the teacher, just so they might not be aware, but let them know, oh, my child, really appreciates this kind of structure and is really doing well. There's less distraction. So just letting you know, and that gives us a lot to think about and to adapt when we're back in the classroom. So
yeah, that's good.
Do we have any other audience questions, Paula?
No, I think Alexis wants to ask a question. I don't know if she wants to come back on. Do you want to come back on, Alexis?
Hi,
There she is.
there I am. So my question is also from our point of view as a company. So we are really aware. I mean, I've seen my mom for years, right? Like make the material she needs. Mm-hmm. I've seen her make it from scratch multiple times just because she can't find it anywhere else. And yeah. I mean, she's a veteran teacher at this point. So this was way before teachers pay teachers. But for example, right now we're creating a bunch of content that's free, and we want, educators to have it, and we want families to have it. What's the best way for somebody like us or other small companies that might be tuning in to help you and alleviate that load, especially if we are in a position to provide it for free or at a low cost, or just something that makes sense and helps you further what you're doing, right?
Right. I think that, this connecting with the educators that you see on social media, you can reach out to educators and say, look, this is what we're offering this for free, or we have all these resources. If you can find a way to disseminate that to your parents and your families. We all have our parent email groups and as teachers, and we can even share that with our district. I think anything that gets sent that is like, these are great resources to help your families and your students, if we'd love to share. So I think definitely just communicating with the educator or the district. There's district contacts, and having that kind of relationship and connection would be great for them to then know about it and be able to share it. I know we have in our district, we have a dual language bilingual department, and they are always emailing us like, oh, we found this free resource, or we communicated with this person, there's this. So even looking at the bilingual ESOL dual language departments of districts, like, look, this is our resource, it's great, it's available, is a great way for them to then share it with their educators, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing we want is to create more work, right? So definitely finding a way to communicate and help would be great.
Yeah, and then they can share it with. I love looking at, if I see my emails, I'm like, oh, this looks great. Let me think of how I'm going to share that with my parents and use. So it's definitely nice to have those things available.
So Laura, tell us how our viewers can get in touch with you and reach out.
Yeah, well, through social media, at Learning Bilingually, I have, you can reach me there. I'm on social media a lot, and I love, dual language education, and the work that you all, you three ladies do is amazing. So I love to like share things with my families and the people that follow me that I think are great resources. So yeah, Learning Bilingually, and we can communicate there and share more ideas and help each other out.
Yeah, we love your Instagram.
Thanks. Love dual language education. So
yes. Well, I think we're coming to the end of this chat. This was really fun, and we thank you so much, Laura, for speaking with us. This has been so valuable. And our next chat is going to be on Saturday, May 16th, with Marina Chaparro. We're going to talk about nutrition and how to involve kids in the kitchen.
Oh, nice.
Yes. I think I really need that one. I haven't been cooking very much.
Yeah, I think I need that too.
Good. So please follow us at Veoleo and at Entre podcast for any updates about our Brújula chats and more. And thank you so much for tuning in. We love having you here with us and spending time. It's kind of like a fun Saturday morning where we get to close, our doors from all of the noise in our house leisurely with a cup of tea and just talk to really, really awesome people. So we hope you found it useful, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.